Let's talk about my journey to top 8 at the St. Louis Major Regional this past weekend. We had 165 players show up at the event, and it was an extremely diverse cast of characters. No character saw over 10% representation. While it was difficult to pinpoint the best deck in the room, the overall meta breakdown fell right about in line with my expectations. I thought Toga 3 and Rodon were locks to be the most represented characters, and that ended up happening. Amajiki, Endeavor 3, Byakko, these were all characters that were in my top 10 in my Endeavor Mountain top character tier list video about a month back. And then Mina 2 and Ochako 4, these are the most popular 6-hand size aggro characters of the day, so it makes sense for them to be very popular at the event. But the actual best performing characters, Elder Toguro and Ghidorah, weren't even at the top in this character representation. But we'll talk more about those characters later on, and those characters might become more infectious with players piling in. We'll just have to see. Overall, if we go back and look at my Endeavor Mountain video and my top characters, these are the ones that ended up making top cuts. Amajiki, Rodon, Bionic, Toga 3, Elder, Hawks, Pony, and Ghidorah. Of these, 3 of the characters really separated themselves. We had 3 Amajikis, 4 Rodons, and 3 Ghidorahs. Everybody else were just single ofs. So those 3 characters had the best overall performance in the tournament. Rodon, Amajiki, and King Ghidorah. The big surprise here is that Endeavor 3 did not end up making it. I think he felt a little too slow in the current meta. At least that was the thought process of my teammate, Ross Aubrey, who came 1 game short of topping with Order Bionic, but we ended up having Zach Bargery top with Order Bionic. Ross just felt like Bionic was a little faster than Endeavor 3, and he enjoyed being able to win on turn 2 or turn 3 more than having to wait until later in the game and then rely on that form to go and find your best piece. So those were the best 3 characters in the tournament. There was 1 character that I had, I didn't even have my eyes on in topping an event, and that was Jester, who Tam Cardwell topped with. So big shout out to Tam Cardwell, probably the biggest content creator in the game right now. As for what I took to the event and finished in top 8 with, I took Amajiki. But I was playing a very unique build of Amajiki where I was relying on this new action City Rampage. Basically, City Rampage was going to allow me to be more aggressive with Amajiki, to be ready on turn 2 or turn 3 to play a long string out. And it was going to allow me to just play all of Amajiki's best attacks. Basically, when I looked at Amajiki, his 4 best attacks seemed clear and obvious. Black Abyss, Armor of the Wolf, Deception Dagger, or Vast Hybrid Chimera Kraken. And I did an entire deck profile on this the night before the event, so go back and watch. That should just be my last video where I talked about my Kuryu and Amajiki decks. I'll just give you the elevator pitch here. The elevator pitch is that I want to play all of these 5 difficulty attacks. Most Amajiki decks are choosing 1 lane to go down. You know, are they going to be a weapon package, this ally package, or this slam package? And I'm saying I just want to play all of them, and City Rampage is going to allow me to do that. There's just enough synergy here to make it work. The Armor of the Apes and Armor of the Wolves is just enough slam attacks to get Steaming Spheres online. The Black Abysses and the extra Walk the Dog, just enough weapon attacks to make the Deception Dagger giving stun 2 to another weapon a solid enough synergy. So there's just enough of synergy to make this really consistent. And then I just get to play all of the best attacks. My foundations, I'm focusing on foundations that blow themselves up to get momentum because I want to play this aggressive version of Amajiki where I have 3, 4, 5 momentum by turn 3. So Force Cork Activation, Steaming Spheres Power, Friend of Animals, and Strategic Meeting are the momentum generating foundations that I chose. A little bit of defense like Broken Psyche and Fast Friendship. Monster Aggression is one of the best 1 difficulty foundations in the game. Destroy for +1/+1, and it's a 2 low block in a meta where low blocks are really important. That's another one of the benefits of playing this 5 difficulty tribal attack lineup is that you get to play spam foundations like Monster Aggression, and then just a lot of 0 difficulty foundations to get these strong early turn builds. Then my sideboard was completely focused on Action Hate, Incredible Display to stop things like Genkai's Guidance, Disarming Glance to stop like Referee Jury, Reluctant Retreat to stop the barrier shields and Referee Juries, Unstoppable Force to bring my attacks back to printed after they use Barrier Shield. Incredible Display also is going to stop Runaways, and then an Armor of the 8 for characters like Coda, where they're just throwing a million printed damage moves at you. So that's the elevator pitch of the deck. It's not a very complex deck, we are just playing extremely aggressive Amajiki, and we're just going to have enough defense to survive to our kill turn. And we're going to make that kill turn happen very, very early. Okay, this is how I ended up doing at the event. These are all 10 rounds that I played. I've got my 8 rounds of Swiss here, followed by my 2 rounds of top cuts, where I eventually lost to the eventual champion of the tournament, Travis Tangeman, on his super cool Death Elder Toguro deck. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. I want to, not take you through each of these rounds in details, but kind of talk about the best moments of the event for me and the worst moments of the event for me. Before getting into the specifics, let me just say that overall, one of the best things about this tournament was that I never played a character twice. You'll notice I played Bionic, Godzilla, Endeavor 3, Toga 4, Mina 2, Mimic, Mount Lady 2, Rodon, Amajiki, Elder Toguro. It was an extremely diverse cast of characters that I played into, and that made it really fun that the way I played and the strategies that I took changed round to round. The way you play offense, the way you play defense, all of this is going to shift based on who you're playing against, what you're siding in. That it just made for a really interesting day that never got boring. It wasn't like Nationals a couple of years back where 40% of the field is on Kirishima 2s and you're just pulling your hair out. You just don't want to play this matchup anymore. Or even just younger Toguro 4 months ago, where when you went to Las Vegas, you knew you were going to be playing 2 to 4, maybe 5 or 6 matches against younger. And at some point, that just becomes kind of stale and boring. So St. Louis did not have that very diverse meta, very diverse Swiss rounds for me personally. So round 1 was Order Bionic against Zach Bardry. Zach made top cuts in Las Vegas, top 8, I think, with an all version of younger Toguro. So I knew that this was going to be a pretty difficult matchup. And I took game 1, he took game 2. And then in game 3, when it was on my turn 2, I heard them announce that was time in the round and that we were in overtime. So I knew if I passed back to Zach, that was going to be the last turn of the game and I wasn't getting a turn 3. Well, on turn 2, I drew into City Rampage plus like 4 or 5 attacks. Normally in that situation, I would go City Rampage into 2 attacks, build a couple, pass. Now I probably have 2 momentum. I've built a little bit. There's a good chance I'll survive, and then I can win on turn 3 or turn 4. But in this situation, since they called time in the round, I just had to go for it. So I played City Rampage into all of my attacks. I checked running 7s, and I ended up winning on turn 2 just barely. But the funny thing is that after I won, it turns out that wasn't time in the round. They had called that there was 10 minutes left in the round. So I would have played that game totally differently if I had known the truth. I would have just, played my attacks, built a couple, and then hoped that I get to see a turn 3. But because they announced that it was time, that I thought they announced it was time of the round, it ended up working in my favor and ended up winning on turn 2. And that's just the silliness that happens when you have an action like City Rampage. Like you sometimes just trip into winning on turn 2 when you absolutely should not be doing that. Zach ended up actually going 6 straight wins after his loss to me, and then he was 6-1. He could intentionally tie the round 8 and made it into top 16. He did lose in the first round to top 16, but what a comeback after losing his round 1 to win 6 straight and to make top cuts, 2 straight major events, both Las Vegas and St. Louis. So I wanted to make sure that I gave Zach a shout out. Next up, in my round 2, I lost against William Godberry on Chaos Godzilla. I really wanted to win this match because William beat my brother Patrick in top 32 at Nationals. So William was the reason that my brother didn't make it to the World Championship in Orlando this last year alongside me. So I wanted to get some revenge for my brother. William was great to play, but I wanted to get my revenge for my brother Patrick here. And it ended up being that William is just the Tomb Slayer, and he took me down. But in game 3, so I won game 1. All the rounds that I lost, I won game 1 in. It's kind of silly to think about it now. At least I can say nobody ever 2-0'd me. I was always able to bite a kneecap. I always took game 1 and then lost game 2 and game 3 in all 3 of my losses. So in game 3, there was on defense, I had a 2 high block and 2 low block in hand, and I knew I just needed 1 block, and then it was going to get passed back to me, and I felt like I had game on my turn. But in order to get that block, I was going to need to check a 5. So on his first attack, I went to check a 5. It was a high attack. I used my 2 high block. I have to check a 5. I check a 3. And then his next attack is low. I use my 2 low block, blocking with monster aggression. I need to check a 5. I check a 3 again, and then I lose the game on it. And then he had to pass one more attack. He had to check a 5 on it and not check a 3, and he did check a 5. So it was kind of a tilting loss to think that if I had just checked a 5 on either of my 2 potential blocks, I likely would have taken that round and been 2-0. After this round, I had to take a walk around the event and just kind of clear my head. I like to tell myself stories whenever a tilting loss like this happens, that I, mostly put on bad luck. Although I'm sure that there's points in game 2 where if I had played differently, maybe I could have pulled out the win. William probably just outplayed me in that game. William might have had some bad luck in game 1. So, it's hard to say, hey, this round was lost due to bad luck. I never like saying that something was just purely because of luck. It doesn't make you a better player. It makes you a better player to think back on what you could have done better. But in a situation like that, it's hard not to chalk it up to just, dang, if I had just checked a 5, so I had to walk around and I like to tell myself stories like, well, maybe this loss is what I needed to make top cuts in the end. Maybe if I had won and been 2-0, I would have different matchups. And then those matchups would be bad for me. But because I'm 1-1, I go down this other path, in the universe, and that ends up being what I need. So that's how I like to get over tilting losses. I like to just tell myself that, hey, maybe this is actually what, when I look back on it at the end of the event, this loss was actually healthy for me because it gave me the matchups that I needed to end up making it. That might sound like some serious hopium, but staying positive is part of the challenge in these events. You're going to have a tilting loss happen almost every event, or you're going to have a loss happen where you just misplayed almost every event. And it's how you respond to that matters. And so if you allow yourself to get down in the dumps in your brain, like, it just always happens to me. I just always check 3s when it matters. Like, that's a really unhealthy mentality. And then you're going to end up playing worse for it. So I like to tell myself things like, okay, maybe this is what I needed to have a good event later on. In rounds 3 and 4, I played Arthur and Russell on Togefor and Endeavor 3. And all of my bad luck in round 2 kind of transitioned to these players in their rounds. I think Arthur had a moment where he played 2 straight attacks. And if he had checked a 3 on either attack, he wins the game. But he checked 2 2s in a 70-plus card deck where he only plays 4 2 checks. And he had already had 2 in the discard pile. He checks both of his remaining 2 checks to not be able to pass his attacks to kill me. It was just heartbreaking. It was like a 1 in a 1,000 event. So all of that, talk about bad luck in round 2 reversed for me. And I ended up being 3-1 going into round 5. So round 5, I was on stream. You can go back and watch it. I was playing against Death Mina 2. And in game 1, I was able to win on turn 2, going second. I built a strategic meeting and then 2 steaming spheres, and I had the slams in my momentum, which meant that I knew that I could get 3 momentum on turn 2. And 3 momentum is all an Armor of the Wolf needs to kill. It's kind of funny watching back and listening to the commentators not quite realize that I was about to spirit bomb my opponent on turn 2. They were like, he probably shouldn't be playing an attack on a 6, because if he checks a 3, this could be very bad. But they didn't realize that even if I checked a 3, I knew I had game at that point. And so if you go back and watch game 1, I win on turn 2, sending like a 29 damage Armor of the Wolf. That was a ton of fun to show off like how powerful this build of Amajiki can be very, very early on. In game 2, I misplayed. Oh, so I should send this. Okay. In game 2, I misplayed. And this one's going to stick with me for a little while. Basically, on his first attack, I used my once per game on Amajiki to unflip Armor of the Ape to get another -1 damage. And you would be shocked at how much I was using Amajiki once per game just to get -1 damage on something with Armor of the Ape. I was doing it all the time. In this build with a very low defense Amajiki, that -1 damage can be the difference between seeing another turn or dying. And I don't care about wasting my once per game if it means that I'm staying alive. Fundamentally, the game is about staying alive and killing your rival before they kill you. So in game 2, I used Amajiki's once per game on the first attack when I should have kept it for the next, or he played another attack and then he played Acid Splash. And I should have kept my once per game on Armor the Ape because I could have zeroed out Acid Splash. And then I could have full blocked his next attack, Battle Aura Release, which was his last attack. And assuming Battle Aura Release didn't draw him into another attack, I would have survived, and then I almost assuredly would have won on the backswing. So the misuse of my once per game on defense, because I was really just thinking about tray size. Like, okay, I could zero out a tray size if needs be. But since I was down to like 2 or 3 health, I think, on that turn, it really wouldn't have mattered because he would have echoed his tray size. I don't think I had Incredible Display, and I would have been dead. Or maybe I did have Incredible Display. I can't remember the specifics. I just remember feeling like a dunce for not zeroing out the Acid Splash. And then in game 3, going second, he wins on turn 2 because he drew literally all attacks. If you go back and watch it, I survive every single attack playing just... I felt like I just played out of my mind defense on Amajiki on turn 2 and survived an attack string that there was no world in which I should have survived. And it came down to his last attack. He had to check a 5 to pass it, or he had to check a 4 or 5 and checked a 4 and was able to pass it and take me down. That happens sometimes. It's Mina too. If they draw hot, they just kill you a lot of the time. But it was really game 2 that I ended up thinking about. So I had that round 2 loss to Godzilla, where I felt like I lost mostly on just those 2 bad checks on defense. And then this round, I kind of chalk up to misplay. I should have zeroed out the Acid Splash on defense in game 2. And because of that, I ended up losing. So now I'm in a really uncomfortable position. I'm 3-2. Once again, I'm having to take a walk around the event. Like, maybe that event happened, maybe that round happened for a reason. Maybe this is what I need. Now I need to go 3-0 in my last 3 rounds in order to make top cuts. But tried to never give up on myself and stay positive. Okay, going up, we had round 6, which I've got this circled in red here for a bad moment, which you might think is silly when I ended up winning it, but I felt like I didn't deserve this win, and I kind of lucked into it. Basically, game 3, I won game 1, he won game 2, and then in game 3, there was a moment on probably like turn 3 or turn 4 where I felt like if I passed back into Mimic was going to kill me. And so but that this wasn't chance to deal lethal if I drew hot. Well, I ended up not drawing well at all. I drew 1 Black Abyss, 1 Deception Dagger, I think, and 3 City Rampages, and Mimic was at full health. But I did the math, if I play all 3 City Rampages into Deception Dagger plus Black Abyss, and here's the momentum that I have, and then I have these Steaming Spheres. I can put in Armor of the Wolves. That's going to be plus 4 damage over the course of both these attacks. I've got my Amajiki once per game for like plus 7 damage. When I mathed it all out, I had lethal by 2 damage. Or it was by 1 damage, sorry. I had 26 damage if both Deception Dagger and my Black Abyss ended up hitting, which I felt pretty confident that I could make them both unblockable. So I went for triple City Rampage, but then Disaster happened and I checked a 3 on 2 of my City Rampages, which ended up changing my math to where I was off lethal by 2, or I was off lethal by 1, because it took me from being above lethal by 1 to below lethal by 1. But when I redid the math, I thought that I was actually good because I forgot to subtract out the 2, because I was going to have to commit one of my Steaming Spheres powers, which meant that I wasn't going to get an Armor of the Wolf and Momentum for plus 1 damage on both. So I mismathed when I kind of remathed after checking the second 3, like, am I really going to go for this or not? And then I ended up going for it. I went for the Deception Dagger, but Mimic was actually able to half block my Deception Dagger. I didn't fully take into account the ability of Mimic. Even if you stun Mimic out, he can still use his assets to pass checks. He still gets that like trigger, which is going to give him plus 1 to his check. So I didn't fully take that into consideration. And so even if I had checked 5s on my city rampages, I still would have lost because I didn't have a way to draw. And those were my only 2 attacks. So I'm actually very thankful that he blocked the Deception Dagger, because even though I mismathed the lethal string out, now with the half block, it was obvious it wasn't going to be lethal. It was an almost all lows Mimic package. And so I knew the 1 low block on Black Abyss was going to really matter. I built like a Fast Friendship and a Zero Diff Foundation and passed back. I think those were my only 2 ready foundations. So I figured I had Amajiki's once per turn damage reduction. I probably was going to get a block off with Black Abyss, and then I just had to hope that Mimic didn't draw 2 more attacks. So as long as Mimic doesn't draw 3 or 4 attacks, I'm okay. And Mimic ended up blanking on their draw, and then I won on the backswing off a single Walk the Dog. But it didn't feel like I fully deserved that one, because if Mimic had drawn hot at all, or even like 2 or 3 attacks and then checked an asset and been able to go and find that last attack selectively from discard, I would have certainly died. So that was my bad on going for this triple city rampage line that I hadn't fully considered. And then our next round on Earth Mount Lady 2. In game 3, I was going second, and my opponent mulliganed a 2 foundation hand into a 1 foundation hand. So they were only able to build 1 on their turn 1. I built like 4. And then on their next turn, they still were able to play 2 attacks and build 2 more foundations. So all in all, it was like a pretty nice recovery. You know, now they've dealt damage to me. They've got a couple more foundations. But then I drew into double Chimera Kraken. And I felt like this happened a lot throughout the event, but this is the round that it mattered the most. It felt like I was always drawing into Chimera Kraken when I needed it. The universe was just giving it to me at the right times. So in this game 3, when he only had 3 foundations, I drew into double Chimera Kraken, played both of those, committed and froze both of his foundations that he built that turn, putting him back to 1 foundation on his turn 3. And then I was able to win on my turn 3. He wasn't able to attack into me anymore. He had to just take that turn and build. But by that time, I had 2 Chimera Krakens in my momentum, which is going to be plus 8 speed over the course of a turn. As long as I draw into a single Arm of the Wolf, I've probably just got game. And that's ended up being what happened. But there was also a game against Toga 4 where I drew into double Chimera Kraken at the right time. I was able to take down both Invincible Body and Condescending Explanation. And if he had had either of those, probably would have been able to live that turn. But because I started the string with the double Krakens, it worked out. Also against Travis in my top 8 match, I felt like I was seeing Kraken at a pretty good clip in games 1 and game 2 at least, to always keep his like sports festival champ combo foundation committed and frozen. Okay, that takes me up to my win and in match. The reason this is circled in red when I ended up winning is because it felt really gross to go up against a teammate on a win and in game. This was George from the Let's Talk UVS competitive team. George, of course, won the webcam circuit with Void Rodon. He was back on his Void Rodon build, except with some updates for this event. We were both 5-2 going into this round. I had tested extensively into George, and specifically this Void Rodon list. In testing, my Amajiki deck was 1 win, 5 losses. I had a terrible record against George, but I ended up just going a pretty swift 2-0 here in this round. I just got exactly what I needed. By turn 3 in game 1, I had double Black Abyss and a Kraken in momentum. So even if George had 1 barrier shield, he was going to need 2 barrier shields to be able to block my Armor of the Wolf. In game 2, I got a Deception Dagger momentum, started with the Deception Dagger. He had switched into Woman. I think I stunned 6 in my first attack and was able to take it from there. Both games just, my deck just told me that I got to win that round. So even though in testing I was doing pretty poorly when it came to the real deal, I ended up going 2-0, but it felt kind of gross to do it over a teammate. I wish that there was a way in which George and I could have not played each other and then both gotten into top cuts, because I think that Void Rodon list from George was probably the best Rodon list in the room, in my opinion. George's day went, in his first round, he played against a Chaos Death Arms. I think that was Sam Hyatt. And he felt like, he said after the event that if he had practiced into Death Arms, he thinks he could have taken that round. They were pretty close games, but he was very surprised against the Death Arms matchup. And because of that, he felt like Death Arms was able to take control of the game and end up beating him. And then both of his other losses were against teammates playing Amajiki. I think he lost in like round 5 or round 6 to Carson Panos, who made top 16, also on the Let's Talk UVS competitive team, playing Amajiki. And then round 8 lost to me. So he had almost the exact situation as I had in Vegas on Void Jin. Basically, where I dominated most matchups, but I lost both of my Jiki matchups. That's almost exactly what happened here to George. Felt a little gross to have a win and in against a teammate. We had 5 team members, I think, on win and ends. Or we thought that TC was on a win and end, but he ended up bubbling out with Byako. He went 5-1-2, and because of his tiebreakers, finished in like 17th or 18th place, just barely missing out on top 16. And then from there, I played Calvin in top 16. I didn't know it at the time, but now I realize that Calvin is like one of the most accomplished competitive players of all time in Yu-Gi-Oh! And he started playing Universus about 6 months ago. He's been playing Amajiki. His list was very, very focused on Black Abyss. He was using Command Pigeon Flock to build in his Friends of Animals to go grab his Black Abysses. He was very consistently getting to 3 Black Abysses in momentum quite early. But when I looked at his list for top 16, I noticed he was playing 0 Broken Psyche and 0 of the defensive actions on Chaos. There was no Runaways in the sideboard. There was no Genkai's Guidances in the sideboard. And so I knew that this round was basically just going to be a race. You know, how fast can I find my wolves and make them unblockable? In game 1, I ended up sending a perfectly lethal Armor of the Wolf on turn 3 for 20 damage. I had never dealt damage to Calvin that game. I got Armor of the Wolf to exactly 20 damage. And then Calvin could have still blocked if he checked a 5, but he checked a 3 on his block, and I took game 1. The way I was able to get Wolf to exactly 20 damage was off of the back of Training with Gunhead. Training with Gunhead was this 1 difficulty foundation that I put in last minute into my deck list because I figured it synergized really well with City Rampage. Since City Rampage is modifying my checks, Black Abyss is modifying my checks. Training with Gunhead could give my attacks +1 speed. Repeatable for basically the entire turn thanks to City Rampage. And then it also had this enhance that you could remove it to take the damage of this throw attack down to 2. And I thought that throw attacks were going to be a big deal in the tournament, a much bigger deal than they ended up being for me. I don't think I played against more than 1 or 2 throws the entire weekend. So the card ended up being completely dead for me. I actually never once built it and played City Rampage. If I built it, it basically just said my deck was never going to show me City Rampage. It just kind of ended up happening like that, where it was a completely useless foundation for me all throughout the weekend. And then when it did end up mattering was in this game 1 against Calvin, but it didn't end up mattering because of its enhances. It ended up mattering because it was 2 enhances that I could use just to get +1 damage on Armor of the Wolf, just to get Calvin to pass and say +1 damage. So the first enhance says, if the check of this to play this attack was modified, it gets +1 speed, but there's no cost to playing that enhance. So I could play that enhance even if the check hadn't been modified. It just does nothing. And then the other enhance says remove the damage of this throw attack goes to 2. So I could play that, but my Armor of the Wolf wasn't a throw attack, so I'm just removing it for nothing. So the best thing that Training with Gunhead did all day with me was just to have 2 playable enhances that, despite doing nothing, helped my Armor of the Wolf get to 20 damage. You know, that was literally the only thing Training with Gunhead did that entire weekend, but it ended up winning me that event, or that round. Calvin took game 2. I ended up taking game 3. Those were pretty cut and dry matches. I was pretty proud of that game 1, though, because everything was going wrong for me that game. Felt like I was checking a 3 on everything. I do think Calvin could have won had he not been too careful with his Amajiki once per game. If he had just pressed his Amajiki once per game, I'm not sure he noticed that I was just full sending this Armor of the Wolf and, you know, saying this is either going to get me the game or I'm going to lose. Because if he had pressed his Amajiki once per game earlier, instead of saying pass, he could have kept my Armor of the Wolf at 19 damage. 1 off lethal to where failing his block wouldn't have mattered so much. He would go down to 1, but there's a good chance I wouldn't be able to pass my next check. It just would have been, hey, does your block zone match my block zone, And can I even get the damage above? Well, he had already used his once per turn. It was just his once per game. Like if he had pressed the once per game button, I think he lives that round. And that takes me to my top 8 match against Travis. Travis was running this crazy 6-attack deck that was just focused on getting Sports Festival Champ out, removing one of his foundations. He had lots of foundations with remove costs so that he could use combined firepower on his attacks, like Twisting Azure Inferno, respond for the +2 damage every time he plays a combined firepower. So he gets it up to like 20, 30 damage. And then he uses his character to swap the speed and damage. But because he used Sports Festival Champion and said the damage can't be reduced, then now it's going to be like a 30 speed, 30 damage attack. So everything of Travis's deck was just like, can I find the combo piece? Because Elder will always be able to find your attack, and then your foundations will help you find the combined firepowers. So the really only question is, can I find the Sports Festival Champ? Game 1 ended up going pretty long. Travis was not able to find Sports Festival Champ for quite a long time, probably like 5 turns, but he was able to build a ultra defensive wall. So my plan was going into this game, hey, just kill him. It's 19. He's 19 health. And I give stats incongruence. Elder defensively is really going to feast on decks that give only damage or only speed. But I'm a deck where I'm using City Rampage to give both speed and damage, Monster Aggression to give both speed and damage. I've got like Kraken to give speed, Wolf to give the damage. Like I'm a very like or Black Abyss to give +1/+1 or +2/2 +3/3. I'm a very congruent stats deck, which should play well into Elder. So I felt like, while I was going second, I didn't think I was completely doomed. And even if he did find the Sports Festival Champ, if I could also find the Kraken to commit and freeze it down, or if I could stun out his entire stage and then use Force Quirk activation to just blow up his Sports Festival Champ, or if I could use Deception Dagger to remove his combined firepowers, remove his attacks from discard, I didn't feel like this was a hopeless matchup. I didn't feel like that at all. In fact, I felt like if I drew pretty hot, that it might even be a favored matchup for me. So in that game 1, he couldn't find the Sports Festival Champ for several turns, but his defense got bigger and bigger. He ended up getting like 12, 13 foundations. He had triple Knots Flask, which represented -9 damage on my turn. He had a League of Villains out so he could cancel any of my most powerful enhances. But then he was able to build a Sports Festival Champ, and I knew that I needed to sculpt an incredible attacking hand. And so by the time he built Sports Festival and passed back to me, this is like turn 6, I'm able to draw into triple City Rampage, and I've got like 3 attacks in hand. I think 2 Armor of the Apes and an Armor of the Wolf. So I go triple City Rampage, very similar to my Chaos Mimic round, except this time I don't check 3s. I check pretty well on all my City Rampages, and then I play an Armor of the Ape. And I have like 5 momentum because I've just been slowly building this up over the course of the game. And of course, he uses League of Villains to cancel my plus speed and plus damage. But because of like the 2 Black Abysses in my momentum, giving +8/+8 over the course of that attack, basically my 1 Armor of the Ape was able to kill Travis through 3 Knots Flasks and through a League of Villains on only 1 attack. I didn't even have to use my other 2 attacks. Just that Armor of the Ape was able to present lethal. Through all of the defense that Elder presented, I was still able to get there. That just feels incredible. That's kind of what makes this Amajiki deck so fun to play, is the fact that I was able to add like +40/+40 onto that Armor of the Wolf, onto that Armor of the Ape, and full send it. And able to get through all of that defense that Travis had. So I won game 1. Game 2 is very, very close. I lost on I think he still could have gotten it to lethal, but it would have been up to chance. But he forgot to use Sports Festival Champ first before using something else. And so I could have broken Psyche'd and taken it from 9 damage to 2 damage. And then he probably would have still gotten it to 20, but there was a chance of not getting it to 20. So I misplayed there. What happened is, in the heat of the moment, I thought that Sports Festival Champ said the damage of this attack cannot be modified, not that it can't be reduced. And so I was waiting for some reason in my head, you know, like I knew how the card worked. But because it's such a niche card that I was not prepared for going into the event, for some reason that one turn only, my brain just got like the definition twisted. But I knew that it said reduced. It's just that in my brain on that one turn, I thought it said modified. And so I was holding out, you know, thinking that he would have to wait until he added all his damage to use it. And so, you know, who knows what would have happened. Maybe if I had used my Broken Psyche, I survive and I went on the backswing. But we're going to a game 3. I get to go first, so I'm feeling pretty good if I can draw a super aggressive hand. The game ends up getting to this point where I think it's turn 3 or turn 4. And I draw into double City Rampage plus like 4 attacks. I've got like 4 momentum. I have a Force Quirk activation in my stage, a Steaming Spheres in my stage. As soon as I drew into the hand, I thought, this is it. I've won the game. I'm going on to top 4. I'm going to play double City Rampage. I'm going to go into Walk the Dog, or I've got a Deception Dagger in my momentum. This Walk the Dog is going to have stun 5 now. Even if he's able to somehow block the Walk the Dog, I'll then follow it up with a couple Armor of the Apes that get really huge. And this should be game. And it ended up not being game because Travis played absurd defense and because of some poor luck on my part. So let me tell you the things that needed to happen. First, on my first City Rampage, I check a 5, but Travis uses Fighting for control to say I check a 3. I decide, well, +1/+1 is probably not a big deal over the course of the turn. A bigger deal is just making sure that I have these Force Quirk and Steaming Spheres ready and Monster Aggression ready. So I fail that check. And then I play City Rampage again, except Travis uses Showdown to cancel the form on City Rampage. Meaning that it's going to be difficult if I want to play a string of attacks now. Whereas before I wasn't too worried about it. You know, as long as I played a City Rampage and got +2 to my checks, I felt like I even if Walk the Dog got blocked somehow, that I was going to be able to follow up with enough attacks to present lethal afterwards. But he used City Rampage on it, which now meant I was not going to be able to pass all of these checks to play out my hand. I was going to have to basically just get this on Walk the Dog at this point. So I play my Walk the Dog. It's still getting the +1/+1 from City Rampage. But when I use my Force Quirk, Travis uses his switch when my Walk the Dog's at 8/8. He uses his swap just to destroy a foundation so that he can use those 1 difficulty bunny foundations to say -3 speed. I think it's called Rabbit Finesse, if I'm remembering correctly. And so Travis is able to give me -6 speed. Because the big downside of Deception Dagger momentum is that, yes, I was going to be able to stun out Travis's stage, but it was going to take me several enhances. First, I say stun 1. Then I say flip for stun 2. Then I say stun 2. Then I'm going to use a couple of my other momentum enhances. Then I'm going to use Amajiki once per game to unflip everything. Then I'm going to flip Deception Dagger to give it stun 2. Then I'm going to say stun 2. You can see how this is a kind of long process, and there's just no way I'm going to be able to get all of the stuns off before Travis is able to commit his foundations for -6 speed. So he was able to give my Walk the Dog -6 speed. I, of course, have given it a speed from City Rampage. I've given it a speed for Monster Aggression. And so that's 2 speed. And then Travis is stunned out at this point. He has a Showdown in his card pool. He has his character ready. So as long as I can get Walk the Dog to 5 speed, I've won the game. I used Force Quirk to go and grab a Chimera Kraken. But there's no Chimera Kraken in my discard. Because if there had been a Kraken in my discard, I put it into my momentum. I say 2 speed, Amajiki once per game, unflip Kraken, +2 speed. Now it's at 6 speed. There's a Showdown in Travis's card pool. Even if he blocks on a 1 low block, it's going to be on an 8. He can't pass the check. So all I need is a Chimera Kraken in my discard pile, which my discard pile has like 20 to 30 cards in it. There should almost always be a Chimera Kraken there, but there's just not. There's just not this game. But there is a Black Abyss. So I put in the Black Abyss. I used the Black Abyss twice over to give it +2 speed, +2 damage, which takes it to 4 speed. So now with the Showdown in the card pool, if Travis has a 1 low block, he has to block on a 6. He has to check a 5. But I honestly didn't think that Travis played 1 low blocks, because in my memory of our round, remember, I had just, thumbed through Travis's deck before, but this was such a unique deck that came out of left field. I was not prepared for it in the slightest going into the event, that I didn't think Travis played a 1 low blocks. And then when Travis didn't immediately scoop to me, I look through his discard pile and I see a copy of Teamwork. And I'm like, no way he has a copy of Teamwork in his hand. Like, 1 Teamwork is in the discard pile. Who plays Teamwork to begin with? Who plays more than 1 copy of Teamwork? Well, it ended up that Travis did have the Teamwork in hand, and he checked a 5 on it, committed, was able to pass the check, was able to pass the block because my City Rampage had been canceled by Showdown, and that I didn't commit for my first City Rampage. I was unable to play out my hand to beat him anyway, and ended up losing on the backswing. So that game was just like, looking back on it, if I had passed the check for my first City Rampage, that would have given me my extra speed I needed to make Walk the Dog lethal, no matter what. If I had reviewed out, I had a Kraken in hand going into that turn. If I had reviewed out my Kraken to put a Kraken in the discard pile, that would have won me the game. But how was I supposed to know I was going to draw into Walk the Dog? Yeah, if I had a Kraken in my discard pile, if Travis didn't have a 1 low block in hand, that just kind of hurts looking back on. I replayed if you can't tell, I've replayed that game in my head about 100 times by now. It really, really stings to lose like that. It felt kind of gross, but at the same time, like, kudos to Travis, even when his deck wasn't working for him as well as I'm sure he would have liked. He was still able to pull out the win against me. When Tam did his top 8 replay with Barrett the other night, they replayed my match with Travis, and Tam lost on turn 3 both games, I think, because Barrett was able to build the Sports Festival champ turn 1 both games. Tam wasn't drawing into Kraken. And so that kind of made me feel better, like watching Tam lose with my deck in like 10 minutes to this Elder deck, when Travis's and I round went like 75 minutes. We almost took the full 90 minutes. It just kind of stung because I felt like I had a legit chance to win that, because of the fact that I'm giving my stats in congruence and that I'm so aggressive that I can hit before Travis is able to find the combo to kill me, and before he's able to set up enough defense. So, took game 1. Game 3, I put him on having a 1 low block in hand, and he did. What can you do? So that's how it went out. I'm pretty proud of making top 8. Although, if I'm being honest, I'm kind of tired of topping events and not winning. I started playing competitively really seriously about 15 months ago. I think I've top cut 5 major events now. I top cut Florida last year with Shoto Todoroki 1, lost in top 16 on a misplay. That one still stings. If I didn't flip my wall clean and block with my Frigid Heat Wave, I would have had my Frigid Heat Wave for the backswing, and that attack would have been what I needed in that game, in that round 1 versus the True Form All Might. The Webcam Regional Season 2 last year, I topped with Mirio. When I lost that round, it felt, if my deck just didn't work for me. At Nationals, I made top 4, but I lost to George. And then on the way back home, I'll be honest, for like 5 hours, I was just thinking about that round with George and what I did wrong. I think I played kind of tilted. I just played losing Universus is how I felt, even though I had taken game 1 that time. And I really wanted to win that Nationals. And then George ended up going on to win. And now we're teammates. So anyway, I really appreciate George. Let's see. I top cut the Webcam Regional this year, where I lost in top 16. The HLC I lost with Hawks and Falling Skies. I just feel like I'm consistently getting really close to winning, but I haven't won yet. I haven't joined the Kevin Broberg, Tam Cardwell, Tim Keefes, Travis Tangemans. Like, I feel like I'm a step below them on the competitive ladder, and that's really bothering me. I really want to win one of these events. So I'm happy that I made top 8, but if I I would be lying if I said I'm satisfied making top 8 because I'm just getting sick of topping events and not winning. So that is where things are at with me. As for the event, Travis ended up winning the entire thing with his Elder list. The Ghidoras were the big surprise. The fact that 3 Ghidoras made top 16 when they weren't even the most represented characters. And then half of our top 4 was Ghidorah. I did want to shout out John Mafio. He was doing some commentating with me in my Godzilla Girl Power event. And I saw people asking, who's this guy? Who's this guy commentating with David? I've never heard of him. Well, he goes by Dankus Dad. He has a YouTube channel where he's been doing these like training videos. It's really good content, honestly, especially if you're just getting into the game and you want to become a good player. John has kind of showed off his skill here at making top 4 with Ghidorah. I saw that just earlier today, he put up a deck profile of his list. So go and check that out. So those were the two big surprises here. Elder and Ghidorah being so good in the event. And it was nice to see some competitive Yu-Gi-Oh players doing well here. Ryan Levine with Hawks and Calvin with Amajiki to come in and prove that they can be good at multiple card games. Kick butt here in Universus as well. Also good to see Tony. Tony's normally one of our main judges in the community. So normally he's on the judge side of things, but here he chose to be one of the competitive players and ends up making top cuts. So, he's not fully retired yet. Kevin Broberg back in action with this cool Earth Pony list. These Rodons were pretty interesting because Andrew and Gavin were running almost the same list on Void, and they weren't running combined firepower. And then Calvin and Barlow were running very, very similar lists on all. So it was interesting that we had 4 Rodons, but like 2 lists. We had this all mids package, and then we had this Void package. Both of them showing out and proving those deck builds. I think Calvin posted a deck profile of his all Rodon, and I'm going to be honest, that looks hella fun to play. I'm thinking about playing that for my local championship this weekend. Here was Travis's list, his crazy 6-attack list, where he's just focused on playing Sports Festival Champ, and then he can play Twisting Azure Inferno out of his discard pile. He has these foundations that remove, like the Big Fall and Foresight, and then he can respond with all his combined firepowers and use those. He has Teamworks to add damage, Avoiding Conflict. He can play to put on the bottom of his deck, and then he responds for the damage on the Azure Inferno, and then whenever he mills those Avoiding Conflicts with the combined firepowers later, he gets an extra +2 damage. It's just a really consistent deck. Also the flasks for the damage and the defense. This is a very defensive deck. You're basically guaranteed to check 5s because you only play 6 attacks. And then because you're Elder, you have the attack that you need. When you need it, you always have the attack that you need. Which takes me to my final point, that the best 2 characters in this event were King Ghidorah and Elder Toguro. And these characters have one big similarity. They're both playing out of their discard pile. Elder gets to form, discard 1 non-foundation, choose an attack in his discard pile and play it as his next form. Ghidorah is an enhance, so he does have to play 1 attack first, but then he can commit, remove a card from his hand, choose an attack in his discard pile, and he can play it as his next card that turn. So on defense, he can always block with true 100% to guarantee his block. On offense, he can go and find his best piece. So if you go back, I was watching Tam's stream the other day of replaying the top 8. It was incredible how good Tetra Terror was in King Ghidorah. He removes Tetra Terror. He gets to play it as a 4 diff with 6 speed, 4 damage. If it deals, he gets to go and find something, echo it, is 6 speed, 4 damage again. He's adding on all these stats from those Hiei foundations that say if you're at 10 or less health, he's always at 10 or less health. The list that actually ended up doing best of the Ghidorahs was the Void package from Ben Lambright. Very interesting to see Ghidorah playable on both Evil and Void at high competitive levels. But the similarity here is that we're playing out of our discard pile. And this is something that I am worried about design-wise with Universus going forward. We see this coming in Attack on Titan with this attack. I think it's called Reluctant. No, it's called... It's the one that I made a whole video about. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but basically you form with it in your discard pile, destroy 3 foundations, play it as a 3-def. And then it gets even more stats depending on how many foundations you have fewer than your rival. It's just crazy. We have combined firepower right now getting played out of our discard pile. We have other characters doing this like Mimic, where you're getting to go and find something from your discard pile and pick it up. It was incredible to me how many times throughout this weekend I had to ask to see my rival's discard pile. And that really slowed down games. That might be partly due to me playing Deception Dagger. But Deception Dagger is one of the best cards right now, specifically because you get to manipulate your rival's discard pile. You get to remove something. You get to remove a combined firepower, remove a Twisting Azure Inferno, remove a Walk the Dog for Chaos Mimic not to be able to pick up and just murder you with. And that was slowing down games. Or Byakko, gets to stack his deck from his discard pile. So removing Referee Jury could be a big deal. Not let him do those like Referee Jury chains. And those were slowing down games quite a bit. And I think it kind of goes against Universus, because Universus is a game fundamentally based on your hand size, and that you draw up to your hand size every turn. Other card games need to be able to tutor cards from their decks or from their discard piles or into their hand, because they're only drawing one per turn. And so to be consistent, they need all these tutoring cards. But in Universus, you draw up to your hand size. So if you're a 7 hand size character, you see more cards, and because of that, you have fewer health. If you're a 5 hand size character, you're seeing fewer cards, but now you have more health. And then Universus is all about, you have to find it. This keeps a lot of decks in check that would normally be ultra powerful. Just that, they have to draw into it. Or you have to sculpt your hand. You have to find the kill turn. And so having all of these characters and strategies playing from the discard pile feels like it's taking away from that fundamental aspect of Universus. We've seen this be too powerful in foundation pickups already, right? Kirishima 1, Kirishima 2 both had to be eroded because they were way too consistent picking things up that they needed from their foundations. Overhaul felt like still very, very strong, but balanced just enough to where it worked out. But now we're getting cards in Attack on Titan that also play from discard pile. We're getting Armin, who's doing face down things again. We've got these 2 characters doing very well here, just as toolbox characters. You always have what you need when you need it. And I'm not sure how much of a problem this is going to be going forward, having characters that can always have what they need when they need it. Right? Universus, you're supposed to have to draw into things or sculpt into things. So I don't think necessarily that Travis's deck needs to have anything banned. I'm not going to, react to one event and say Sports Festival Champ needs to be banned or Twisting Azure or Combined Firepower needs to be banned. If they did hit any of those 3 cards, I wouldn't mind it. But I'm not calling for it. Travis did lose a round, I think, to Chaos Coda in Swiss. Again, I put him on needing a 1 low block in Top Cuts to win. I don't think it's this unbeatable deck. It reminds me kind of that True Form All Might deck that came to Florida last year, where it was it just came out of nowhere and it really benefited from nobody being ready for it. Going into future events like this United Kingdom regional, if people are teching more for Ghidorah and more for Elder, maybe people start mainboarding Heroes Upbringing so that they can seal Ghidorah down. If they start teching for these characters, then maybe they don't do as well. That was maybe one of their biggest advantages in St. Louis, is that, who was practicing extensively into either of these 2 characters? We were all thinking about Toga 3, Amajiki, Rodan, and these characters kind of blindsided us. So they definitely benefited from that. But it is something I'm worried about going forward, is how much is this design of playing from the discard pile going to continue and going to alter the way Universus is played? Now, remember, I'm not an old head. I joined with My Hero Academia. I joined around set 2 of My Hero Academia. So I don't know about past Universus designs and how much playing from the discard pile really mattered. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'm just calling it as I see it, that this is a strategy that has become really, really potent, and we've been given a lot of cards doing this. What's next for me? I've got a local championship tomorrow. I'll probably be playing Earth Endeavor 3. Hope to get some championship points there. I think I'm at 48 championship points. It's puts me like right on the cusp of Worlds. It's pretty stressful for me since I only have one locals. I have to basically win every event I play in or top cut every event I play in if I want to make Worlds. But that's tomorrow. I'm excited for that. And then we got the Atlanta Regional in October. Attack on Titan is going to be legal. Attack on Titan is going to change everything about the game. And we only have a couple months to get ready for it. We have September 7th is our next webcam circuit event. If you want to get ready for October, that's going to be standard format. We got a lot of reveals coming fast and furious to keep up with. Oh, and by the way, this next coming Saturday, let's see, July 27th and July 28th is going to be the United Kingdom Regional, and I get to be one of the commentators for that event. So come tune in. You'll hear me giving some analysis. I'm very, very excited for what the United Kingdom players cook up. And I'm excited to start testing with Attack on Titan for this October Atlanta Regional. I'm tired of just making top cuts in these events. I want to win. And so I'm calling my shot now. I am going to win the major regional in Atlanta in October.